Hello, how are you? Sean Ferrick here for What Culture Horror, and today we're going to go through all of the ups and downs for Sinners, which is the new film by Ryan Coogler. If you've been to one of these ups and downs before, you know how this goes, but just in case, we go through the film and give everything that we liked an up, and we take everything that we didn't like and we give it a down. And as we go along, we give you a little bit of a background to the film as well. Sinners is written by, produced by, and directed by Ryan Coogler. It's his first original piece of work outside of adaptations and franchise pieces that he's done before. Of course, you probably know him from the Creed films, the Black Panther films. Yeah, he knows what he's doing. He really, really does. It stars his frequent collaborator, Michael B. Jordan, who is playing two roles in this film. He's been in everything that Coogler's done since he got his start in Fruitvale Station back in 2013. I'm going to say this right up the front. Michael B. Jordan is brilliant in this film. He kind of comes with an expectation of being excellent, and I'm very happy to say he completely delivers. He is, of course, not appearing on his own, even though he is appearing twice. As we go through the film, I'm going to discuss the different performers kind of as they come up, but just kind of in the beginning, again, you really have to shout out Miles Caton, who plays Preacher Boy, or Sammy, in this film. He is this is his first film. He is just so good in a role that's he sort of bookends the film. I guess I should say, if you haven't seen Sinners, pause this video, go and watch Sinners, and then come back, because this will be a full spoiler review, okay? You've been warned. So the character of Sammy bookends this film. You know, we do get the wee little prologue in the beginning, which, sure, listen, we're jumping off now. My first up of the film goes to that prologue in the beginning, explaining the power of how music can connect with the dead and invite those we may not want to deal with in again. Discusses the different cultures that discuss this. You know, the legends of West Africa, the legends of the Choctaw people, and the legends of the Philly from my own lovely back garden, from the Irish folklore as well. And then we get this shot of Sammy, bloodied, driving up to a church where he opens the door. His preacher father is there, and we go to one day earlier. I will say, I find this a bit of a risk, because sometimes you're giving away the game just a little bit too early, aren't you? Well, we sort of have it in our minds, at least Sammy's going to survive some sort of cataclysm. I mean, he does not look healthy at this point. He's got scratches on the side of his face, he's got a broken guitar neck, and yeah, quite frankly, I'd say he's looked better. But he is alive. Is this then a misdirect? Well, sort of yes, isn't it? Because it suggests that he will be the only survivor of some sort of dreadful thing that he's just come from. Sort of true, sort of not. Miles Caton, however, gets an up from me in this film, because from his first moment right up until his last appearance, he is mesmerizing as Sammy. Another up for this film goes to the setting. The Mississippi Delta in 1932 evokes immediate images and, historical settings, if you like. I know I've just used the word setting twice, but you straight away have an image of what we're going to be dealing with, particularly when our lead characters are all people of color. American South, not historically a wonderful place to live if you were a person of color in the early 20th century, really. I suppose you could just pick any period of history. And this is all over this film. Jim Crow laws are discussed quite a few times throughout the film, and if you'll forgive my indulgence for a second, Jim Crow laws were in place in the southern states of America to basically ensure racial segregation when it came to working. This was after emancipation, so technically there was no more slavery, but the way the law was set up, it ensured there was no equality. This helps us to understand what a big deal it is that Michael B. Jordan's characters, Elijah and Elias, Smoke and Stack, returning to Mississippi looking like they've made quite a big deal of themselves, why that's so attractive to their friends and family. In a potentially unusual move, I'm giving Michael B. Jordan's Elijah an up and a separate up for Michael B. Jordan's Elias, because they are two distinctly different characters. And I mean, even in the year of madness 2025, I still sit there in the cinema and go, how did they do that? When you have them standing side by side. And yeah, there's all sorts of camera trickery, and they've been doing it for years in cinema, but it just looks so good. And the way that they're styled, the way that they move, the way that they speak is all so distinctly separate that not only do you appreciate the fact that these are twins, these are two different characters, but they are not, they're identical, sure, almost in terms of appearance, but they're not identical in terms of their actions. Stack is clearly the more hot-headed of the two, where Smoke is the more coldly calculating, and yet there is a rage that fuels so much of what he does. There's more flair, if you like, to Stack, where Smoke is a bit more, how would I say? If one of them was the brains, the other would be the face. You know what I mean? Smoke will make the plan, Stack will go out and make it happen. Which is effectively what happens for setting up the juke joint in this film. It being set in the American South in 1932, as, you know, the audience is sitting there going, so when do the clan arrive? And the way it's handled is very, very clever, because this film knows that you're expecting the clan to arrive. So when Smoke and Stack are checking out the mill with Hogwood, there is the deliberate inclusion of Hogwood going, "You boys." And everything gets really tense for a second when they say, "Ain't no boys here," because we know why that word in particular was used to address them. And in a clever twist, Hogwood immediately goes, "It's nothing meant by that. I hear you. I wasn't suggesting the racial connotation of that. I apologize." And you kind of go, okay, maybe we've misjudged this Hogwood. Well, we'll see how long that lasts, eh? They buy the mill, they do it in cash, Hogwood seems happy, and it looks like we're set up to have a good day. They are going to have to split up, and this is where we start to see the real differences in the two. Stack and their cousin Sammy, Miles Caton from earlier on, they team up to go and get the music and the performances together for the juke joint later on, while Smoke is tasked with putting together the menu and the signage. Before any of that then, we do have a scene that it might put some animal lovers' teeth on edge, but I'm talking about the scene with the rattlesnake. I think it's very effective in how it frames the three characters. So you've got this truck that's hidden off the side of the road. Well, we'll come to why it's hidden now again in a moment, but you have how Smoke reacts to the rattlesnake, how Stack reacts to the rattlesnake, and how Sammy reacts to the rattlesnake. So they uncover the truck and suddenly there is a coiled snake. It's hissing. It's gonna go for Sammy. He is frozen. He doesn't know what to do. Smoke calmly says, "Don't move." What he does is he reaches for Stack's weapon. And then 1, 2, 3, Smoke brings the weapon down on the rattlesnake's head. This very, very quickly sets up that in a crisis, we are expected to believe Sammy's gonna freeze, Stack is the muscle, Smoke is the brains. It was clever, it was quick, and knowing full well that no real rattlesnakes were hurt in the making of this film, it's an up from me. We get the fantastic scene of Sammy and Stack in the car together. Sammy plays his guitar and he sings. Now that guitar, a 1932 Dobro Cyclops resonator, is what Ludwig Göransson, who wrote the music for this film, as he has done for every film Ryan Coogler has done, wrote it on that guitar, that exact guitar. He has spoken in interviews about how this film is the most personal score that he's ever written. And actually, I just want to do this now. A whopper of an up goes to the character that is the music of this film. It is so intertwined with absolutely everything that is going on. I mean, even think about it. The juke joint itself it's a dance hall. As much as it is a place to get a drink and a place to get food, it's a place to go and sing and dance. And that is our setting, if you like, of most of the films, certainly the film's second half, and looms large over the first half. But Sammy's singing is also a massive element of the film, as is, jumping forward a tiny little bit here, as is Remek's singing and music as well. And jumping back all the way to the prologue, the music that unites the worlds of the living and the dead. Göransson nails the score for this film. I've been following him probably since Black Panther is when I was really first exposed to his music. And for me, it's so unique. And I just find myself getting lost in the soundtrack. If you get a chance, it's now officially released as of the time that you're watching this. Do give it a listen. It's just brilliant. And I will talk about it again now in a moment as well. But yes, I must also credit the fact that, Miles Caton is singing live. That is his voice that you are hearing. And that is, again, something with this film, is that there is so much live music being performed while the recording is going. Funnily enough, there is, in the long history of singing and dancing in film, a lot of the times what you're hearing is post-production. You're hearing people who have recorded music after the fact, which is then looped back in, and, a lot of the time it works brilliantly, it's set up to work brilliantly, like it's really not an issue. Other times then it is done live. Sometimes it really, really works. I personally would argue that the film version of Les Miserables worked quite well. I know that itself is a whole debate, was at the time. Here, I think it's crucial. I think they couldn't have done it without performing live. Now, things are obviously cleaned up as you go along. You want to get the best sound possible, but you really get the feeling that you are experiencing what is happening in real time with the characters in the film. Sammy and Stack make their way to the railway station, where we meet one of my favorite characters, Slim, played by Delroy Lindo, and he's just brilliant. He's a hard-drinking, hard-playing blues musician who has his spot at the station. Every Saturday night he's playing in the same bar, and he's going to be doing it for 10 years to come. You know, as soon as he's speaking, who this guy is, what he's about. And it's the drinking. It's the drinking. Because, history students out there, what was going on in the 1930s in America, eh? And why would it be such a note that, Smoke and Stack might have been working with Al Capone? Prohibition was in full swing during the setting of this film, which means that truck that they had hidden off the side of the road, the truck that was hidden or stacked with so much alcohol, it's all illegal. They're bootleggers as much as anything else. Smoke and Stack they're portrayed as gangsters with a heart in this film, and it comes across well because they're not especially good guys, nor are they especially bad guys either. And when our true villains arrive, you certainly have someone else to root against. But they're not simple heroes of the land either. That's another big thing. Smoke's scene when he goes into town, when, he gives the little girl, was it, 20 cents a minute to watch his truck for him while he goes in to speak to Grace and Bo. You know, he's going to give the girl some money. He comes out then, and then shoots two guys in the middle of the street. Now, he's not shooting to kill, but he's got a reputation to uphold. He's layered. There's violence there, but there's heart there as well. I have jumped ahead a tiny bit. Another up goes to Perline, played by Jamie Lawson. She is brilliant because, again, you get what she's about in the first few seconds. You know, you find out so quickly she's married. That's probably not going to make much of an issue when it comes to her relationship with Sammy. She's going to go and sing in the juke joint later on, and also Jamie Lawson's voice is just incredible. She is so good in this. I first saw her in the Batman, Matt Reeves' The Batman, as Bella Royale, and also the Penguin. She's brilliant in this. And then we get the character who I will admit I was a tiny bit apprehensive about, Mary. So Mary is our first white passing protagonist character to arrive, played by Hailee Steinfeld. And for a moment, let me explain my trepidation here. It was like, is this sort of our another viewpoint character? Is this our, you know, what was it like for white people in 1932, and especially when you had white people and people of color, you know, spending time after hours together and partying together, and you know that that's going to be an issue. And handled clumsily, that can be quite a dull trope. It is not handled clumsily, nor is it quite what I expected them to go for. So I'm also very happy to say an up goes to Hailee Steinfeld in this film. Certainly coming out and saying things I've never heard Hailee Steinfeld say in films before. There is a manner of speech that runs throughout the whole film that feels real. None of it feels forced. The way that the characters interact with each other, you know they know each other. And that is one of, I think, the core strengths of this film, is that by the time we get to the big climax, you actually care about these characters, because every character in that bar at the end or toward the end is a character, not a trope. And that is a massive success on the part of the film. In this quick little introduction of Mary, we learn that she's literally just lost her mother who was very, very good to the boys when they were small as well. You know, we learn through some expository dialogue that Stack and Smoke's dad really used to wail on Stack a lot, but Stack just goes, I didn't mean it. And I'm sure there's many people who experienced violence at the hands of their parents who probably would say the same thing. It's just how it happened. It was just the way things were. But you also, in the same breath, learn how Smoke protected Stack. And that's a very important part of their story, is how Smoke is certainly portrayed as the big brother, even though they're twins. But yes, in this scene in particular, we learn that Stack and Mary, definitely more than just friends. Yep. And they've definitely gotten to know each other very well in the past. On Smoke's journey of the day, another up must go to Lee Jun Lee, who plays Grace, and Yao, who plays Bo. They're brilliant. Like, they get less screen time, but even in that screen time that they have, they are real characters. And also, what they help to do as well is broaden the world a little bit. You know, it's 1932, Jim Crow, Southern States of America, and yet here are two Chinese American characters. And it just helps that even in a world that can so often be portrayed as very binary and very insular, it's actually a much bigger world out there. They are, you know, they're clearly established. They seem to have at least 2 stores in the town. You have Bo is working with their daughter Lisa in one store, and you have Grace, who is over minding the shop in the other store. We get a great one-shot as we follow Lisa and then Grace back through the town. And Grace as well, after 2 boys have just been shot outside, doesn't blink. In fact, she negotiates a deal with Smoke. Really like the characters in this film. But I think my favorite character, and I think many people's favorite character, is going to be Annie. Wunmi Musaku, who many people will know from Loki, is one of the brilliant things about how she holds herself as Annie is that we're introduced to her as Smoke comes to see their child's grave. And it just feels all so real. We see her in a plot important moment where she accepts company script from a couple of children who are paying for her potions. Her hoodoo practitioner becomes obviously very important as the film goes on. And this also sets up a little bit of a learning curve for Smoke as well. But between the two of them, you can see there's so much restraint and also so much missing each other here. You know, there's no throwing each other's arms around each other. It's like, oh my God, you're back, it's wonderful. It's like, no, you're home. And yet, there isn't then that immediate other trope of bitterness. Of, oh, you're back, well, I don't want anything to do with you. There's nothing like that either. In fact, you get this feeling that although they lost a child together, life just hit pause when Smoke went away. We get, again, a crucially important for the plot moment of Annie talking about how she truly believed that her roots and her potions work. Smoke struggles because he said, well, why didn't it work for our daughter? To which she said, well, how do you know it didn't work to keep you and Stack safe? And I suppose it's one of those things where you can't prove it either way. And I like how they, even as sad as the moment is, I do like how they bounce off each other. And we get the first of 3 overt sex scenes in the film, and they're all handled very differently. This is something that feels like two people who know each other in and out finally coming back together again. And it genuinely feels romantic, even in the middle of a shop, in the middle of a day, you know, but it's played as quite the touching, sweet scene. This is quite different to the other 2 sex scenes that come later on in the film. Back with Sammy, Stack, and now Slim as well, we stop and we meet Cornbread, who I just think he's so polite, he's so lovely. He's there, he's picking cotton, and he introduces them to his wife, Therese. They're both getting an up from me. So it's an up for Cornbread and an up for Therese, because Cornbread, obviously for nearly the rest of the film, but Stack just comes out and says, you know, you're going to leave the line, I'm going to pay you loads of money, and you know, he basically says, I'm going to pay you so much money, your wife's going to let you do things that she doesn't normally let you do. And Cornbread's about to get into it with him, and he's getting really offended, and she just goes, shut up, how much money are we talking? And just the way she holds it. Emily Ellison is so good in this scene, sorry. And then Omar Miller is brilliant as Cornbread as well. Now, you're probably kind of going like, you know, they're not like, I thought there was vampires in this film. There's vampires in this film, by the way, and we get Jack O'Connell. Now, Remick is a surprise. So, we're introduced to him as he's clearly starting to feel the burn of the sun, right? Because it's sundown. There is the worry of how did he get there to the house? So he obviously found a way of being covered up at that point. But anyway, and he's being chased by members of the Choctaw tribe. This is one of the tribes mentioned in the prologue in the beginning. He does come inside the house of a couple who, they do pull guns on him, but he has a glance through and he sees a clan hood. He, you know, relies upon their kindness and they let him inside. Brett and Joan are played by Peter Drymanis and Lola Kirk, both of whom have some serious pipes on them, but we're not really meant to like their characters very much. Clan hood. So kind of whatever happens, I'm not gonna feel too particularly bad. And I don't. You know, the door knocks again. One of Remick's pursuers basically says, hey, you didn't see someone run through here, did you? She's holding a gun up to his face and she's like, no. And he's like, well, hope you didn't invite anybody in, bye. And they drive away. Yeah, he was right to hope that, because he's already eaten Brett, who pops back up to say hello, and Lola doesn't seem initially quite happy about this. That might change. But yeah, Jack O'Connell, up from me. Having set all of the characters at this stage into motion, One of the true strengths, as I mentioned, is that we care about them. To maybe some to more degree, some to less degree, but they are all real characters. One of the main inspirations for this film, according to Ryan Coogler, was Stephen King's Salem's Lot. And if there's one thing that Stephen King does very, very well, it's create characters for these horrific settings. So Salem's Lot, if you're familiar with it, is about a town that becomes overrun by vampires, and you can definitely see that here. One of the other inspirations for this film was The Last Rites of Jeff Myrtleback, which is an episode of The Twilight Zone. Coogler is an admitted massive fan of The Twilight Zone, and it's about a man who is dead and reposing and sits up at his own funeral, initially to the delight and then confusion and horror of his friends and family. With everyone in place in the Juke joint, you have Cornbread, who is going to be our bouncer for the night, and you have Mary, who turns up inside, and this is a big deal, because remember, to our eyes, she is a white person, and that was a big deal for a white person to be in a juke joint like this. I'm just going to park that one just for a second. You have music starting to go inside. You have Annie, who's agreed to cook. She's cooking beautiful food for everyone. Everyone seems pretty happy. Smoke is thrilled. Stack is thrilled for a few minutes. I mentioned about Annie accepting company script as payment in her shop. Well, just really, really quickly, what that is that oftentimes companies would pay their workers with coins or, bits of paper or whatever that were tender at stores owned by the company. So in the way that this person could feed, clothe, and house themselves on, as long as they worked within the company's confines. But this kind of tender is no good to a business like Smoke and Stacks because it's not cash. It's not transferable. You can't bring it anywhere else. And Smoke and Stack sort of get into it a little bit. Smoke is absolutely against accepting anyone paying with this, whereas Annie and Stack argue him down and they say, no, like these people who you've got in your bar, and the bar is hopping, to be fair, this is how they get by. You're gonna have to make some allowances here. And in this moment, Smoke does relent. Sammy is there with his guitar as well. He's working pretty much now for Smoke and Stack. Slim is playing piano on the stage. It looks like it's gonna be a pretty good night overall. And it's been overall a pretty good day. Mary comes inside, Cornbread lets her in, and it is at this point that Mary and Sammy, they've met, but they get their first proper chat. And he asks her, what are you? And for a moment there, I was kind of like, hold on, is she a vampire? He's just clocked it? She's white passing. So Mary has a grandfather who is half black, which means for her, she is able to pass as white in her everyday life. This, again, a huge piece of history and about the fear of hiding when trying to be something else, and how Mary doesn't seem to want to do that. Stack is dead against her being there because he doesn't want her to be seen around other people of color, because if it gets back to her people that she's been with black people and, dancing and carrying on, it's gonna ruin her life. But she is adamant that she doesn't care. She wants to be there. And that's one of the things that I quite like about Mary as a character, is that there are assumptions of what she's going to be. That's sort of the point. And she's not that, which does make it all the more tragic then when, again, if you're watching it at this stage, you've seen the film, that she's the first of our main characters, if you like, to be turned in trying to do a good thing. What I suspect is going to be the most discussed film or a scene from this film, and is whopper of an up from me, is that musical montage where Sammy starts to play the blues, and in voiceover we hear about this power of music to transcend past, and you start to see, people who are styled in African tribal garb, and there's drums, and then you have music of the future, and you have a funk guitarist with an electric guitar in 1932. And then you have people styled after the Peking Opera and Sun Wukong at the suggestion, by the way, of Yao, the performer playing Bo. You know, you have this mix and mash of styles. You get DJ decks on set. You have people walking around in 90s hip hop gear as well. You know, on first glance, you're like, hold up, did the continuity officer just take the day off that day or something? But no, this scene showing how music is timeless and merely adapts and can reach into the past and you feel like you're there, and reach into the future and feels like you can see what's coming. It is incredible. It is powerful. It is directly what attracts Remick to the juke joint. The arrival of Remick, Bert, and Joan outside the juke joint is treated with suspicion to the point of hostility, because you have these three very obviously Caucasian people standing outside this place of business. That juke joints were created for people of color to go and congregate, particularly post-emancipation. Their history was that they were pretty much exclusively for people of color. So to have three Caucasian people walk up and say, oh, we want to join as well. There's more to it than just, I mean, we know, okay, the vampirism aside, we know that there's more to the suggestion. And I mean, Smoke comes straight out and says, you clan? Because that's what the fear is that they are just a preamble to a clan attack, as happened upsettingly regularly. Remick tries to convince them to let him in. The three of them sing their song together, and the first instance of, well, okay, we know, okay, 1, 2, 3 vampires, but the first instant of how linked they are comes up when they move in unison, and they sing and they sing and they all move to the left and they all move to the right, and you start to see that something's not right. What they do, however, is promise they have money. Now they're encouraged to leave, and they say they'll walk away slowly. Yeah, they're not going anywhere anytime fast. Inside, Smoke reveals to Stack how they're doing financially, and it's not great. Because although the place is heaving with bodies, and you have Perline, by the way, now singing in a beautiful song downstairs, so many people are playing with script. They won't be able to keep this up. Whatever about one night and perhaps taking a bit of a punt on it, if they go on like this, as Smoke says, it's going to be like 3 months and we're going to go under. So something's got to give. Which leads to Mary and Stack discussing this, and Mary going, well, why don't we go after those three who said they had cash? Look, if they can pay, why don't we get them in here? She goes, they sing a song. They produce gold coins and glowing eyes. I want to give an up here to the pacing, because it handles the tension very, very well. You sort of know that there's an inevitability, don't you? I mean, you've seen the trailer, but you sort of know that a vampire attack is coming. And it's not about the when so much as it is the how at this stage. The rules seem to be, although we'll discuss them, Annie discussed them a bit, the rules seem to be set up that at the very least they need an invitation to come inside. Inside, when Mary is invited back in by Cornbread, she goes and finds Stack, and we get the third of our 3 sex scenes. You'll note I didn't mention the second, so I want to talk about the two of them here together. Sammy and Perline, they go off into the office together, and Sammy puts some of the skills that he learned from his cousin Stack into good use, and it goes very, very well. Now, this one is done as a more, I suppose, traditional hot and heavy. It's meant to be sexy. It's meant to be, you know, just two people can't keep their hands off each other, you know, and even we get that moment of Perline stopping to go like, oh, actually, you let me clean up just a little bit, and Sammy going, I accept you for how you are. Like, I just want to taste you, as he says. Yes, in a vampire film, we get the phrase, and it shows a different version of how sex is handled from what we saw with Smoke and Annie. And here now as well, we get our third version, which is Mary and Stack. We know this is going to go badly, Mary having been bitten by Remick. But what we also get again is this moment of So vampires start to drool when they get, well, frankly, when they get hungry, like I suppose many humans do. And here, Mary's appetite results in drool coming down her mouth. And rather than this, in another film, this would be the, there's something wrong with you, get off me, run away moment. She asks Stack if he would like some, and he says yes, and she spits in his mouth. Now, to many, that will be unusual, and to many, that will be something that is part of sex and sex play and kink. And it is very interesting how this film depicts it. Because yes, while it is the vampire character who is, if you like, the most openly kinky of them all, it's done in a consenting way at this point. It's really fascinating that a film that is on the surface about vampires in 1932 Mississippi Delta is about so many different things throughout it as well. So, how the film handles sex is an up from me. We eventually get to my first down of the piece, and it's the slightly confusing rules of vampirism. So remember, Mary was invited inside the juke joint. They break through the door, she is there biting Stack. It is very sad, Smoke is not happy. Smoke pulls out a gun and shoots her several times. She stands up and says, "We're gonna kill you all," and runs out. It is inferred for the rest of the film that she can't come back inside. So is the rule that every time a vampire enters, they must be invited? Which, okay, if that's the case. Or is it an invite once means you're welcome forever? My down being, it's a little bit confusing because we then get very established rules. So we get wooden stakes, we get garlic, we get silver as well, we get sunlight, and those are hard and fast rules, which are so common to so many vampire myths. What I love about this film is that it doesn't spend the next 10 minutes going, but vampires aren't real. Taken up to just get on with it. That's very well done. What that feeds into as well is Annie's knowledge of the occult, particularly vampires. She, reckons that maybe it could be one thing, could be another, but no. She talks about vampires and what she knows about them and how vampires are among the worst of demons because there's enough of the person left behind that although they're cursed eternally, they're still there. So it's this sort of limbo, this purgatory that they can't escape. And it sounds like, as much as it looks like they're all having the time of their lives, it sounds like hell on earth. I think one of the biggest successes of this film as well is, I would say, up to the vampires themselves. Because for the first time in so many years, these vampires are actually scary and they are actually tempting. It really sounds like they are happy. It sounds like it is a better life. It sounds like this is something you would theoretically want to have happen to you. Everyone seems so full of joy. Stack seems so full of joy when he's outside. Mary seems so full of joy. And even Cornbread seems so full of joy. It's really, really well done because, I'm sure many of the people watching this video will know how overdone vampires are as a trope in cinema and in stories in general. And I know it's quite easy to go like, oh, Twilight ruined vampires, and they certainly did it no favors. I think it was also a tired trope at that point, and it's hard to do something new with it. What this film does is it does something old with it. And I think that really, really works. Also, shout out to the fact that Remington's Irish. Irish, vampire, Bram Stoker. Hey, what's not to love? Grace and Beau have a child at home. Lisa is at home and, they want to make sure that she's okay. The patrons, who have all since left the bar, by the way, they've all gone to their cars and we haven't really heard anything from them. So Beau runs outside to go to his car. Meanwhile, across the road, found the bar patrons. All of them have been turned into vampires, and we get The Rocky Road to Dublin performed by Jack O'Connell. Up. I could go on again about how music aids this film, but maybe tying into my point of the vampires seem so happy. And Although at this stage you sort of get the idea that they are very connected with, Remick has said, I have all of their memories and they have all of mine. You feel that maybe they are individuals, so then they are very, very happy, and frankly, other than being a vampire, nobody seems the worse for wear. So you can understand that confusion a little bit. We'll give a shout out there as well to Jack O'Connell's Irish dancing as well. Don't you think I didn't notice it, Jack? Don't you think I didn't notice it? A sad thing that it does quite well is it handles the delayed reveal of Beau as well. Beau walks up to the door, and while Cornbread is eating someone beside him, he's like, come on, Grace, time to go. Come on, everything's fine. He is him, but he's not. He's happy, but is he? He is absolutely tempting. And this is when Remick reveals that, if they don't come outside or invite them inside, he's going to go and kill Lisa. I said they were happy. I didn't say they were nice. I suspect that Grace will get a bad rap as the reviews start to come out for this film, because it is technically Grace who is responsible for the vampires getting inside the juke joint. She is the one who says, well, come on in then and do something about it. But I do think that there is something a little bit more mystical going on here. I do think that Remick is, this song that is haunting her. I think it is quite pointedly haunting her. I think he effectively pushes her into inviting them in. And in they come, which leads to the death of pretty much everyone. I do have to give it down to... Who was that one? Who was that? Oh, it was a few red shirts dying here. And because it's such a tight film, I think that is a bit of a shame, because there was a few people still in that bar that I did not recognize. I do care about Slim, I care about Grace, I care about Annie, I care about Smoke, I care about Sammy, and I care about Pearline. I'll get to her now in a second. But there was a couple of others who were just like, oh, okay, so you just needed some people to eat. To be fair though, up to the fight that they put in, Slim cutting his own arm open to delay them, and you get that scene of him being basically pulled down off the stage. It's a great heroic death moment. Devastating when Annie gets bitten, and Smoke keeping his promise to her that he made earlier on, that if she gets bitten, he will not let her go through being a vampire. He's devastated, but as she assured him, she's going somewhere where there's a baby waiting for her. It's not as sad a thing as one might expect. And this has the surprising effect of Mary is devastated and runs out of the bar. Stack is infuriated by this because, why has Smoke just ruined everything? Unfortunately, Grace goes out like a hero and I guess saves Beau as well, in that she stakes him, but they're both caught on fire. It's quite horribly beautiful in a way. And upstairs, sadly, Pearline gets bitten as well, and she is herself long enough to warn Sammy to get away from her. Smoke and Stack effectively have what is a fairly evenly matched fight to the end in the top of the juke joint, which is beginning to burn. Sammy, still clutching his guitar, runs out a first floor window, and the fact that he's still walking is impressive, which leads to our big final scene. And this is Remick and Sammy in a scene that seems to be deliberately evoking imagery of baptism, running into the water. He's still holding his guitar and Remick keeps dunking him. He also, I've seen in a couple of the reviews, there is a little bit of a lack of clarity to the where and whens of some of the things. And you do get a suggestion here as to Remick's story, saying that, Christianity was responsible for stealing his land. And, the theft of land is a through line for this film, and Christianity as well. For that to be the case in 1932, Remick is over a millennium old. He is not a young man at this point. But this idea of Christianity stealing land, and this idea, of course, of stolen land is all around them. Also including, of course, the Choctaw Native Americans earlier on in the film. Stolen land, absolutely. And Slim and Sammy having previously discussed as well that, their religion was forced upon them by, the white man, effectively. And, you know, how at least they created their music, and, you know, the white man went on to love their music and just not the people who made it. It's all fairly balanced, I will say. None of it feels like it's being, well, rammed over your head like a wooden and silver guitar slammed across the side of your head. Much like Sammy does to Remick when he is just about to get killed, and it looks like Remick is just about to take him out, and then boom, from behind, Smoke shoves a wooden stake through his heart. Although killing the head vampire is specifically said to not kill the other vampires, it does debilitate them long enough for the sun to come up and burn them all to death. And it is both, in a way, triumphant, because the now monstrous looking Remick is burning there in front of him. It sort of burns into a twister, if you like, into the air, whereas their friends and family all burn right in front of them as well. Very noticeably, Stack did not get an on-screen death. Smoke and Sammy then exit the water, and they take a crate full of guns off the back of one of the vans. I was thinking about this as I was watching it, going like, you know, I'm glad there was no "we need to get to the guns" moment, because it was shown guns would do nothing against the vampires. There was no need for that. The guns are for something else. Remick revealed that his first two acolytes, Bert and Joan, clan family. He revealed that Hogwood, all the way back from the beginning, is the grand dragon of the local chapter, and that the clan was coming to burn the place down and kill anyone inside. So that means after all of the nightmare they've just been through, Smoke has another battle directly in front of him. So he tells Sammy to get the hell out of there, but also to, you know, bury that guitar. To this point where he says, well, Stack told me, you know, you guys won it from Charlie Patton in a game of cards. Just for context, Charlie Patton effectively got the title of the father of Delta blues music. That's a big deal if it was indeed his guitar, but Smoke sort of goes, that was our daddy's guitar. And this idea of Smoke still, in a way, protecting Stack, and Stack still creating this fantasy, if you like. It's enough for Sammy to take the keys of the car, and we get then that link into the scene we saw in the beginning of the film. The car pulling up outside of the church and his father, Jedediah, there. But we do get our last sort of triumphant moment where Smoke is there, ready and waiting when the clan arrives. And, you know, Smoke and Stack, they were soldiers in the First World War. Yeah, he's got military training. He takes all but one of them out. One does get a sadly mortal shot off against him. It's sort of a triumphant scene, but also it's mixed with sadness, because he's sitting there at the end, he's slowly dying, he's in front of Hogwood, who he takes a cigarette off. But we get this sort of beautiful suggestion, which is that Annie is waiting for him after death with their child. Doesn't stop him from emptying his machine gun into Hogwood, though. Up. Back in the church, Jedediah is trying to encourage Sammy to give up that evil music and step away and you know, come back to the light and everything. It's a full circle moment, and it doesn't work. Sammy takes what's left of the guitar, takes the car, and leaves when we get all the way to our final scene. So up for the full circle, and up for legendary guitarist Buddy Guy, who plays Sammy in 1990s. So 60 years have passed by. He is now a famous musician in Chicago. He plays gigs as the credits start rolling, but stick around, because at the end of the night, 2 customers want to see him, and they say they'll drop a couple of stacks on it, because Stack and Mary survived the night, so to speak. There was no way Stack wasn't getting an on-screen death if he was going to die. And so it's revealed that Smoke spared Stack with the promise that Stack would leave Sammy alone for the rest of his life. They come to see him play, and Stack can smell that Sammy hasn't got much time left. And he does offer him immortality and the chance to play without pain and to go on forever, but Sammy says, I'm good. It's as sweet a scene between a human and 2 vampires as I think you're going to get. Mary seems to be reveling in who and what she is. Stack seems very confident in who and what he is, but they agree to leave him. But just as they're going, Sammy asks them, or he lets them know that before the sun went down, he reckons that day was the best day of his life. Did they feel it too? And Stack assures him that he did. It was the last time he saw his brother, the last time he saw the sun. And with that, they leave, and one of the best vampire films I've seen in years comes to a close. Almost, we get a post-credits scene where Miles Caton is singing and playing the guitar. That is everything for Sinners by Ryan Coogler. It is a fabulous film. In case you can't tell, I loved this film. I thought it was so well done. Obviously, the music was fantastic. The history it evokes is so breathtakingly powerful, and the performances are so balanced. I will be shocked if this doesn't get something around awards season. It's funny that we now are at the very beginning of the full thing, so that can sometimes go against films, but this is seriously impressive. I had a great time. I hope you did too. Let us know in the comments below. If you want to get in touch with us on social media, we are at What Culture Horror. Thank you so much for watching along. If you enjoy these ups and downs, let us know if you'd like to see them for any upcoming films as well. You are awesome. I will talk to you soon. Thanks a million.